Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have two great guests on that are in a very interesting industry because you don't really hear a ton of information about people bringing innovation and technology into sports the way that they are, which is why this one stood out to me. Plus, as everyone that's listening and watching the show knows, I'm located in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, so it's always great to feature North Carolina businesses on the show. Maybe I'm a bit biased, but I accept it. I am. So I am glad to have Zach and Adonis on from Hot Route Analytics. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks, Terrell. We appreciate you having us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, it's not very common that you see people going into this industry, so I definitely want to dive into the details of it. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about each of your backgrounds and just kind of how you two met.
You were first Adonis or me.
You got it.
So, we were born, or I was, about 30, 45 minutes outside of Charlotte, Mooresville, North Carolina. I still live up in that area. Adonis actually lives in Charlotte now. We met in the fifth grade, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
fifth grade. And we just kind of had this instant bond over sports. We're both sports junkies. We have been since we were kids. It's something that we talked about all the time. And I mean, from intermediate school to middle school to high school, we always stuck with it. And we played on some of the same teams together. And then even into college and even now, we still talk about it all the time. So that's where we came from. That's where we met. And it was an instant friendship, and it's been that way ever since.
Gotcha, gotcha. Now, what school are you guys going to right now?
So I'm at Catawba College in Salisbury, North Carolina. It's about 45, 50 minutes outside of Charlotte. And then Adonis, I'll let you speak on yours.
Yeah. And I go to UNC Charlotte here in the city, double majoring in econ and business analytics. And next going to get my master's, doing a fifth year master's in data science and business analytics.
Gotcha, gotcha. So I guess with that dynamic, I mean, of starting a business, I mean, the friendship's been there for a while. What's that dynamic like, managing, or I guess, a business when you guys are in two different places?
Um, it's certainly interesting. I think I look at it from two aspects. One, that whole you have the friendship there, and then you bring in the business side of it too. Like you have to find that balance. That's really, really important. We've had to have some tough conversations over time. And then I guess being in two different places, we're close enough where we can get together if we need to. Like I can drive to Charlotte or he can drive back to Mooresville or whichever it is, and we can meet up in the middle. But at the same time, we're on the phone pretty much every day, to the point where Adonis is tired of seeing my name pop up, and he would rather just hit decline, which I get. I get it. And sometimes it goes the other way. He's calling me, and I'm like, man, I would just rather not take it right now. But that's just part of it. It is what it is. So.
Now, I mean, with your love of sports, I mean, there's so many different angles that you guys could have taken to starting a business. So, what was it that really sparked the idea of saying, like, hey, this is going to be our niche of how we combine our love for sports and entrepreneurship? Like, what really sold it for you as saying, hey, this is the idea we want to move forward with?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously as kids, like we always wanted to be in the league, whatever league that was, but we knew pretty early that wasn't for us. So, we just kind of kept going with like the things that we were interested in, what we were good at, and really what it like the turning point was. We were playing. It was some video game, Madden, maybe 2K, and we just started seeing data popping up in there, like the analytics of it in there, and we were like, whoa! Like if it's in a video game, like it's going to be the next big thing across all sports. And I major in data science, and he's always looking at different numbers and going through graphs and all this. And we were like, yo, we can really do this for coaches. I mean, they all like all schools can't have money to just bring on a data scientist or something. So it was like, let's go in, fill in this need, and this is how we're going to be in the sports world.
And it's one of those things too. Like Adonis's school is a little bit bigger, but the school I'm at, we don't have a lot of money. It is really we're a small school. Like we have less students in my college than we had in our high school. Um, and the money that they have to put toward athletics really isn't there. So the whole idea really came about with those smaller schools. As we're sitting and looking at this, like, man, they're at such a competitive disadvantage. How can we help these guys? So that's where it really originated from.
Mhm. So in the earlier days, when, like I said, a lot of entrepreneurs talk about, as the original idea that they started out with kind of changes over time as what they put on that whiteboard or that piece of paper on day one, and then what they have a couple months later kind of evolves as they get feedback. What was that experience like for you guys, and how much has changed from the original idea to what you guys see now?
Man, I mean that process, it's definitely true. We can attest to that.
Yeah.
I think when we started off more or less right after we graduated high school, just brainstorming this. And we were like, oh yeah, like we can just give some advanced numbers to schools. Like that's what they want, just more numbers. Then like we ended up talking, we did some customer discovery with over 40 like coaches, front office people, GMs, ADs. And it was like, no, that's not what they want. They want something applicable. They want something they can use in their everyday worlds, make their life a little bit easier. And that's really kind of where we transitioned into. I'll let Zach talk a little bit more about our app, but yeah, it's much different what we started at.
I mean, I would say at one point the general idea was, and I think it comes from, so Adonis is a little more into basketball. I'm a little more into baseball. We're both into football, but we love them all three. We were like, man, we're going to hit basketball, baseball, football, soccer, badminton, and every other sport under the sun. And then we went, wait a minute. Like we tried to do all these different things at once. And so we had to kind of tailor it back and say, okay, let's start with one. After we get one and we start building there and we get that solidified, then we'll hit another. And it's one of those things like we brainstorm all the time still. From the time we started, like I'll present Adonis with an idea and he'll be like, yeah, that could work. Let's critique it like this, or nah, that's not going to work. Let's get rid of it. And the same, vice versa. He throws them to me and I'm like, I don't know about that. Or yeah, I think we can do that. Let's change it to this. Um, it's just all these little nuances. And I think once we got to talking with coaches, we realized that, and especially at the higher level, a lot of what we wanted to do originally, they already had in some way, shape, or form. So it was, okay, what can we give them that they don't have? And that's where our baseball app, which is our flagship product, really came from.
So speaking of the baseball app, take us through a little bit more detail as far as like what can coaches expect when they're looking at the app, and what's the value that they're getting out of it.
Um, I think our favorite word for it is practicality. And we have a baseball consultant who I think would say the same thing. Like it's very practical. It's something you can implement and actually use on the field. And I'll let Adonis talk more about the idea behind it. But that's the biggest thing with it is that it's not something that's rocket science. We didn't want it to be rocket science. We want it to be simple enough to put in your hands and you can use it right there in the moment. And that's the biggest thing that I think we can say to coaches is, hey, when you get this in your hands, it's not like something that's going to blow your mind. It might in terms of what it can do, but in terms of how to use it and how it functions is really very hands-on and user-friendly.
Yeah, and I think to just like give a little more background about like what it is. So the app, it's Hot Route or HR Next Pitch. This is our Next Pitch app, and what it's designed to do is predict the next pitch a batter is going to see in real time. So then the team will be able to like in some sort of way, however they do it, just kind of relay that information to help them know not only what type of pitch in terms of like fastball or curveball, but also where the pitch is designed to go. So then they can really just be ahead of it and try to make the most out of it. And yeah, I think when talking about the app and what coaches should expect, like Zach said, like it's practical. You use it in game, you use it instantly. It's going to give you that real time feedback and just makes that instant difference. And I think as we've been workshopping it and just using it with other coaches and stuff, we've been able to add to it. And so not only is it useful in game, but coaches can use it in practice whenever they're scrimmaging to help their pitchers know like oh, you're being too predictable. Even a computer that can't even see you knows what you're going to do. So change it up. Or as a batter, this is what you need to be expecting in this situation. Or it gives you the post game reports like this is how you did against these certain pitches. And it's just taking a lot of that manual labor out of it. It's just really automatic. And ultimately, it's letting coaches just get back to doing what they love, which is coaching their guys.
And I think from a baseball perspective too, like speaking directly to it, anybody that watches baseball, I think knows for the most part that at some point, like if the batter's standing in the box and they've got a certain count or in a certain situation, they have a pretty good idea of what pitch is coming, maybe. They're trying to guess. So it's taking the guesswork out. It's using the numbers to say, okay, this is what you're most likely going to get, and really giving them a higher percentage chance of that guessing by predicting it for them, and eliminating that process.
Gotcha. So as you guys have had a couple, feedback from coaches and a couple feedback from, like I said, teams you've interacted with, what's been kind of the coach's response, or what have they said about it after using it and seeing the tool at work?
Um, I think the first one I can speak to is one of the first schools we worked with. They had a coaching intern, and I won't name the school out of the spirit of competition. We don't name any of our schools. It's not to do that. But this guy, like Adonis and I, after we walked away from that particular school, like we kind of laugh about it now because it was like a kid on Christmas. He got so excited. And the same thing with some of the coaches. And at first, they were a little skeptical. This is one of the first schools we worked with. They were like, who are these guys and what do they really want? But I think after we walked out of that first meeting with them, they were like, man, and it was kind of mind blowing. Would you agree, Adonis?
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I guess what not to get too deep into the details with, all of the data and the analytics that go into the tool. So are you guys constantly pulling, or is the app constantly pulling updated data and input from, I guess you say, wherever the data sits on an ongoing basis, or are like there set times for updates?
So, and I won't speak a crazy amount to it because Adonis is a little more on the tech side and I'm a little more on the business side. But the reliability and the validity of the app goes up each time it's used. Um, we're collecting more data every time somebody puts a new pitch in. Um, and the whole idea is that the more pitches you have, so if you start with this sample size, it's accurate. But if your sample size gets bigger, it's more accurate. And the more and more you add to it, the more accurate it gets.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool features about it that, what I was able to work into it is if we have a school out in California and there's a game out in Florida, two games going on, like those games can positively benefit from each other because the algorithm is just getting smarter. It's like, oh, well, this situation, this is what to expect. And this game over in California just further reinforced that. So let me tell these guys in Florida that same thing. And so it's always getting smarter in real time. So yeah, it's a really cool process going on there.
Awesome. Now, if someone's interested or in, getting the app and they want to bring the app to their school or to their program, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you, or how does that process work?
There's actually a number of different ways. So sometimes we reach out to the schools, see if we can get them to come to us. But if it's something that you find that you're more interested in before we can get to you, because obviously, I mean, we're a two-man team at the moment trying to get to as many people as we can. But um, you can DM us on Twitter. Our Twitter is at Hot Route Analytics, right, Adonis?
Yeah.
Yeah. Our email is hotrouteanalytics@gmail.com. And then on our website, there's a little pop-up box on the screen when you go on, just on the home screen, and you can sign up and it gives us your email and we can contact you. And then we're also on Instagram.
Awesome. Now, one of the last questions I wanted to ask, that I ask every guest that comes on, is when you think about, where you guys have been in your journey so far, and you think about where you are now, what's one lesson that each of you would share with the business owner to say, hey, you know what, based on what we've been through and what we've learned, this is one lesson that I think you should take to heart?
I think mine would be, whether you're in business with somebody that's your friend or just somebody that is a business acquaintance, you have to be willing to have those hard conversations, um, because that's the way you make progress. To expect everything to go perfect, it's not very realistic. Um, and it's a grind at times. Like you have to put in the work because if, I mean, you get out of it what you put into it. But I think Adonis and I, like, we had a conversation about having the hard conversations. Um, Sometimes you have to say stuff that the other person may not necessarily like. He may tell me something that I go, man, I don't really agree with that, or man, I can't believe you feel that way. But at the end of the day, like we try to separate business and friendship. We always come back to that middle ground of, okay, we're going to figure out a way to make this work together. But sometimes what I have to say and what has to say may not be on the same wavelength, but it has to be said.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
and I think what I would say kind of ties in with that actually is I would just advise make sure that whatever it is, it's a labor of love. You know, you gotta have a passion behind what you're doing. Like Zach said, like you gotta like it can be a grind, and not to glorify working a lot and burning yourself out, but it is a grind to it. I recall early on working on this app when we had our first deadline from a team. I was working probably 19 hours a day, sleeping like 4 hours, and this was for a full week straight. Everything college related got put on the back burner, and I mean the only way you get through that and can smile after is if like you're really passionate about it. So whatever business or venture you want to go into, just make sure like your heart's fully into it.
Yeah. I mean, not to go crazy personal, but like going off of what Adonis was saying, when you hit that point where you're working so many hours a day, like I literally watched him take a jar of peanut butter and some bread, like a loaf of bread. And that's what he ate for multiple days at a time because that's what got him through. Like that was what he needed. That was a meal per se, to
Peanut
keep
butter
him going
sandwiches.
because it was just all you do is sit there and work. And I think we both had those days. And you have days where you just want to take your laptop and throw it out a window and watch it crash, but you can't do it.
Nope, I completely agree that yes, that has been a very common thing. I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs on the show, and it's one of those things where like I said, you don't want to glorify the grind, but it's a very real part at some point in the journey. So definitely thank you both, Adonis and Zach, for coming on. Definitely been a pleasure to learn a little bit more about your background as well as the Hot Route Analytics tool, the Hot Route Analytics story, and definitely cheering for you guys for continued success. So thanks for coming on the show. Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.